Lane Kiffin said that Austin Simmons is the starter if he is 100% healthy. The question is, will he be?
You are Locked On Ole Miss, your daily podcast on the Ole Miss Rebels. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome to the Locked On Ole Miss podcast, the most watched Ole Miss podcast around. I'm your host, Steven Willis, a 10-year veteran member of the national media with Yahoo Sports and a former Ole Miss staff member. Also spent a little time at WSMV in Nashville as well. On today's show, we break down the SEC's release of the annual opponents for the next 4 years, which for Ole Miss includes the Oklahoma Sooners. So we'll be joined by John Williams from Locked On Sooners to discuss how this series is getting the rivalry treatment. Next, we'll talk about why it's time to move Ole Miss and LSU back to Halloween where it belongs. Now that the SEC schedule makers have made that possible, we'll explain. But first, we start with Lane Kiffin's comments about Austin Simmons. Kiffin confirmed that Simmons is the starter if he is 100% healthy, but right now they simply do not know. With LSU's defensive line presenting such a challenge, Simmons will have to be 100% ready to go before taking the field. All of this and more on today's Locked On Ole Miss podcast. Remember, we're free and available on all the podcast apps and on YouTube. Thank you for making Locked On Ole Miss your first listen every day, and a special hello to the insiders and everydayers who make the show what it is. Today's episode is brought to you by Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use the code LOCKEDONCollege, all one word, for $20 off your first order. You can definitely probably use the Game Time app this week as the ticket prices are just crazy at the moment as well. So Lane Kiffin was asked who the starting quarterback was, and all of the media cranking back up, trying to start a quarterback controversy. Asked Lane Kiffin directly to get him to, not be a committal coach. Whenever you look at the fact that Lane Kiffin wants Brian Kelly to guess who is going to be the starting quarterback so that Blake Baker on the defensive side of the ball has to spend time preparing for Trinidad Chambliss and Austin Simmons. It just makes sense. That's football coaches since the beginning of time tried to play that game. But Lane tried a slightly different tactic that accomplished the same goal and shot down a quarterback controversy from the beginning. This is a tweet from Brad Logan. At 100%, he's our starting quarterback. And by he's, he means Austin Simmons. Kiffin also noted the decision on who plays will be about health Saturday against LSU. Just like we talked about on yesterday's podcast, Austin Simmons has to be 100% to take the field against the LSU Tigers defensive line. Otherwise, if you put a statue back there at quarterback where they can basically rush to a spot, it would be problematic. Austin Simmons has to be 100% for this game. And the question that we talked about yesterday was whether or not he was. Lane Kiffin in his press conference talked about how Austin Simmons at the beginning of the game, he was pretty good, but it stiffened up during the game. And that probably comes from whatever injection he was taking before the game. That leads the question, is Trinidad Chambliss the best option for the LSU game for Ole Miss? And that's what yesterday's podcast was about. Trinidad Chambliss, in my opinion, he still should start that game. He gives Ole Miss the best chance to beat LSU because of his mobility and all of the stuff we talked about yesterday. Austin Simmons, though, is a 1-1 level talent. And yes, he threw interceptions against Georgia State and against Kentucky in the first quarter of those games. But you know what else he did against Kentucky? He basically led the last three quarters for Ole Miss to come back and completely dominate that football game. In the Georgia State game, Ole Miss completely dominated that football game. Everybody wants to talk about the interceptions that were thrown, and I get it. You can't turn the ball over, especially against a team like LSU if he decides that he is going to play. But let's not act like he is willy-nilly early stage career Brett Favre going on. He got hit twice, and 2 passes were his fault on interceptions. He's realistically thrown 2 interceptions because 2 of the interceptions he was being hit when he was thrown. The interception against Kentucky was on the sideline whenever Bryson Sanders rolled back the snap. That pass got picked off because he panicked. That was a panic play. That is the play that probably everybody looks at whenever they're wanting to root for Trinidad Chambliss to be the starting quarterback moving forward. And against Georgia State, the backside safety came over. He didn't see him. It was a bad pass. Critical errors in both of those games. But coming off of those 2 games, who is to say that Austin Simmons would not have had the same stat line as Trinidad Chambliss against Arkansas and against Tulane? You can't. There's no way to point it out that any way about that. Now, Trinidad Chambliss was a revelation. He's 2-time back-to-back Manning Award recipients of the week. He won the Maxwell Award trophy. Trinidad Chambliss has been an absolute revelation. But he was brought to Ole Miss to back up Austin Simmons. And Lane Kiffin saying that today proves that he believes that still after the last 2 weeks. Now, if Trinidad Chambliss beats LSU, okay, and he has another type game like he's had in the last 2, that Washington State game, the bye week, it gets weird. It gets weird really quickly. You're already seeing in the fan base people going back and forth talking about Trinidad or Austin and arguing back and forth about that, just like they did with John Rice Plumlee and Matt Corral. Ole Miss fans love a quarterback argument. They love that more than anything. But if Austin's healthy and 100% healthy, he's going to be the guy in this game. Better offensive line play than the first 2 games of the year. Better running backs. They call the game a little bit differently. Listen, Brian Kelly talked about he wanted to prepare for Austin Simmons or Trinidad Chambliss, and he notes that preparing for Texas A&M a year ago when they had 2 quarterbacks, but Ole Miss's quarterbacks are similar. No, they're not. They're not similar even a little bit. Both of these quarterbacks are similar. They can run the same offense. It's hard. 2 really good players. They're not similar other than the fact that they're on the field for a Lane Kiffin coach team. They're doing specifically different stuff. If Ole Miss beats Brian Kelly, this quote needs to be plastered as a problem. If you remember against Texas A&M a year ago, it was Marcel Reed's legs that took apart the LSU Tigers that night. It was Marcel Reed running the football, coming into the game, taking over, and grabbing that quarterback job. If you remember Marcel Reed, he was originally committed to Ole Miss. Basically, everybody that commits to Ole Miss, either through high school ranks or the transfer portal, they can just play. They do a really good job at quarterbacks and identifying and developing stuff like that. So Brian Kelly saying that is interesting. Austin Simmons is the starter moving forward. You heard Lane Kiffin yesterday talk about that. But is he the starter for LSU? I don't think so at this point. I think the starter for LSU is going to be Trinidad Chambliss. Now they're going to play games and the injury report and all of that stuff. They're going to play games all the way through the week. And depending on the health of Austin Simmons, I bet you Austin Simmons gets a snap or 2 or 3 in the game to where you can do both sides of the offense. But I do think right now it is trending towards Trinidad Chambliss probably taking those snaps. No need to rush Austin Simmons back. The Georgia game, the Oklahoma game, Florida, South Carolina, there's a lot of games that Ole Miss needs Austin Simmons back for. If he's not 100% healthy against LSU, you could have another situation like DJ Lagway a couple of weeks ago when he just struggled over and over again. So we'll see what it looks like. I'm a fan of this. This kind of is validation for the podcast that we did yesterday. Hearing Lane Kiffin talk about what the quarterback room looks like. Everybody wants me to take a stance. It's like, oh, we need Trinidad Chambliss quarterbacking for the whole year. And it's like, no, I don't do that at all. I take the temperature of what's going on. Everybody's excited about Trinidad Chambliss, but nothing has been done so far to even look at the fact that he is the starting quarterback moving forward once both quarterbacks are healthy. In fact, I said the opposite over the last couple of weeks, even with the performances of Trinidad Chambliss. Again, if this being the best defense that he would see, if he puts up 400 yards again and Ole Miss beats LSU, it gets weird, and it gets weird in a hurry. I'm going to admit this. I was talking to somebody fairly close to the situation this week or last week before the Tulane game. And I was like, okay, if the same thing happens that happened against Arkansas, it's going to exponentially get more, fervent. But if they beat LSU, it's going to exponentially get higher than that, to the point where the noise is going to be too loud to understand going into a bye week. They obviously don't talk about this stuff. They have no problem with it being weird around the offices and stuff like that. There's going to be a lot of guessing, a lot of back and forth. It's going to be a headache. But that does not mean that if you're Austin Simmons, you rush back. Because if you rush back, there's a chance that something could happen that sets back the team for the entire year. Ole Miss beats LSU. They're in the playoff conversation. They need to go 5-2 the rest of the way through the season to make a playoff run. Beating LSU is a must. That absolutely has to happen. Anyway, and Ole Miss and LSU originally could not move to Halloween because of the Alabama game. And Ole Miss versus LSU on Halloween has been a traditional matchup basically until the turn of the century. The century is when it stopped. On Halloween, Ole Miss and LSU should play. They talked about the Goblins and the Ghouls, and you have the LSU side of the Billy Cannon punt return. Then you have the Corey Peterson tipped catch in overtime in 1998. That game deserves to be played on that weekend. It's the traditions, like you're going to hear from Ryan McGee a little bit later on today, that we shouldn't move away from. So Alabama was the reason that LSU said they couldn't do it, because they wanted a bye week before Alabama. Well, Alabama's completely blown out of the water. They're not even on the schedule full-time anymore. Will Ole Miss and LSU move back to Halloween? We'll find all of that out tonight, and everything is lined up to switch that matchup. We'll talk about that next. This episode is brought to you by Square, your favorite neighborhood spots run on Square. There are certain businesses that truly make the neighborhood feel like home, whether it's a local sports bar packed on game days, the coffee shop that knows your order by heart, or the corner deli that has been serving your community for decades. These are the places that bring people together. When neighborhood businesses thrive, the whole neighborhood thrives. Just one of my personal favorites when I lived in Oxford was Phillips Grocery. They have a cabin, rustic feel about them, kind of a new look to it at that time. But the burgers, it was fantastic stuff. Square is a proud partner of more than 4 million neighborhood businesses around the world. You can go by square.com/go/lockedoncollege, all one word, to learn more. But before you do, go visit your favorite neighborhood spot. You'll be happy you did. Square, see you in the neighborhood. And college football is back. I could not be much more excited. The tailgates, the rivalries, the energy in the stands, there's just nothing like it. But let's be real, actually getting those tickets can feel more like a battle than the game itself. Endless queues, hidden fees, and the prices jumping at checkout. That is why I use Game Time. It's an app that gives the advantage back to the fans. It is the easiest way to score last-minute tickets at the best prices with no surprise fees. What you see is what you pay. I pulled up Game Time, and in just a couple of taps, I was able to see $25 tickets for your favorite college football games. Now, it's not the Ole Miss-LSU game. Those are pricey type tickets, but you can check those out as well. And you can use the promo code on this one to kind of get $20 off of the ticket. So I pulled it up, and in just a couple of taps, it was there. And I love the zone deals too. You know, you pick the section and Game Time picks the seats and you save a ton. So take the guesswork out of buying college football tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, that's promo code LOCKEDONCOLLEGE, all one word, for $20 off. Swipe, tap, ticket, go. Download Game Time today. Do us a favor, like, subscribe, and comment on the video. Subscribe to the podcast on whichever audio podcatcher you're listening to, and give it a 5-star review. It costs absolutely nothing. It keeps all of this free. If you want more, join the Insiders program in the subtext link down below. No trolls, 14-day free trial, and the easiest way ever to cancel. So, don't forget to check out a second listen on the network. Nearly every team, college or pro, they're ready for you to join. So, with the 3 annual opponents, and we have a crossover segment, a little mini Thunderdome with the Locked On Sooners host in the 3rd segment, talking about Oklahoma and Ole Miss and the 3rd annual opponent and all of that stuff. Wanted to throw that in there for you because honestly, I have no animosity towards Oklahoma, but we'll talk about that a little bit later. Ole Miss and LSU needs to move back to Halloween. If it doesn't move back to Halloween, the SEC has failed. The SEC has blundered in a way that honestly, I don't know if they can come back from. I will not feel good about them unless they're able to do it. And listen, it makes sense because this is a post that was on X. It's been 23 years, and this has been longer, it's been longer than that, since Ole Miss and LSU played the week of Halloween. Why is it still a thing people talk about? Because it's special, because it's real, because ghouls and goblins and weird stuff happening. It was fitting around the Halloween day. It was lost because LSU got good under Nick Saban and Alabama got good to where they wanted to take a week off the week before the Alabama or the week before the LSU game. That's what they wanted to do. And I understand that. I get it. And that game was, the bye week game was traditionally like November 6th. So Halloween was not touchable. It was not able to be played on that day because they wanted that to be a bye week because it would have been Ole Miss than Alabama. I get that. Now LSU is no longer playing Alabama as an annual opponent. That's gone away. So that bye week need has gone away as well. It is officially okay. There is no reason not to do this, to move LSU and Ole Miss to the Halloween weekend. And the tradition that my father and his father saw about Ole Miss and LSU on Halloween, it can return to these Gen Z players, Gen Z fans that have never seen an Ole Miss LSU game on Halloween. This is an opportunity to give something back to the fans. Whenever you throw out traditions, which they do, they throw out traditions from time to time. This is an opportunity to get at least a little bit back. And it doesn't cost anything. It doesn't hurt anything. Ole Miss and LSU playing on October 31st, it doesn't mean anything other than the fact that a little piece of college football history, a little piece of tradition is coming back. That is a major point to people my age and above. One of the first football games I ever went to was in 1983, Halloween weekend for Ole Miss and LSU in Jackson Memorial Stadium. Timmy Moffitt ran a punt back for a touchdown. I had to be covered up by a coat because of whiskey bottles flying in the LSU section because my mom bought tickets in the LSU section. It is something that made this game from the beginning the game I most want to win every season. The LSU game is of the utmost importance, and the SEC should try try everything that they have to get this game back to Halloween because honestly, it belongs on Halloween. In our final segment, we're joined by John Williams of Locked On Sooners to talk about Ole Miss and Oklahoma being locked in as yearly rivals. Honestly, I'm not upset about it. I mean, that's a fun game and all. And I'll tell you exactly why this matchup makes sense and why fans on both sides honestly should embrace it. That is coming up next. Mazda crafts cars for those who do more than simply move. From footwork to breath work, athletes sweat all the details. Mazda brings the same intention to how they craft every model. You can make everyday drives feel like anything but, from smooth handling to intuitive controls. With all-wheel drive standard in every crossover SUV, you can drive with confidence through almost any season. So like our players, we sweat every detail because when you make every move count, impossible becomes irrelevant. Mazda, move and be moved. All right, let's go into a little bit of mini Thunderdome. John Williams from Locked On Sooners, and we talk about the annual matchup each year between the Ole Miss Rebels and the Oklahoma Sooners. Let's go. We're going to do a little bit of mini crossover action for just a segment because the annual opponents came out. Hello, I'm Steven Willis from Locked On Ole Miss. He is John Williams from Locked On Sooners. And listen, Ole Miss fans thought they were going to end up with Arkansas as one of their three. I'm sure that Oklahoma is just as surprised as we are that Oklahoma ended up on the schedule. But honestly, John, this is a fun matchup to me. There's no animosity that's been built up over time. Ole Miss and Oklahoma have played 2 times, one last century, once this century.
Right.
And because of that, it's still just a new fun thing. Now, over the next 4 years, I'm sure some animosity is going to get built up. But right now, it's just a nice place to go. Ole Miss going to Oklahoma, Oklahoma fans coming down to Oxford. Let's go. Let's make it happen.
Yeah, from all accounts, like every Oklahoma fan that I talked to that made the trip to Oxford last year absolutely loved their time, especially in the Grove, one of the better tailgating experiences in college football. And so we're excited to welcome the Rebels faithful up to Norman this year and see what their experience is going to be like. Oklahoma has expanded their tailgating experience this year to open up more opportunities to just interact and engage and fellowship and just have a lot of fun. So, man, yeah, I'm excited, man. It's not the one that I thought Oklahoma was going to get as the third permanent opponent. Texas was obvious. Missouri, to me, was going to be the next choice. But this is going to be a lot of fun, man. Lane Kiffin is must-see TV all the time. So hopefully he gets to stick around in Oxford for a long, long time and we can build this thing up.
Yeah, if you watch the documentary on Wednesday, it looks like he's going to be there for quite a bit. Anyway, listen, I'm going to be completely honest with Oklahoma fans. I have like I said, no animosity towards Oklahoma. Half of my family is from Lincoln, Nebraska.
Okay.
I grew up with Nebraska fans everywhere and being told that if Nebraska and Ole Miss ever played football, it would be a bad situation for Ole Miss. And granted, in the 90s, yeah, it probably would have been. But Ole Miss has never lost to Nebraska. Ole Miss has never lost to Oklahoma. I grew up rooting for Oklahoma in that game. I am of the age range to where the Oklahoma-Nebraska game was a big deal. I grew up rooting for Oklahoma in that game just to tick off my uncle who is around my age range. And so this is kind of a fun game. You have Marcus Dupree. You have a lot of connections outside of Ole Miss and Oklahoma. This is just going to be a fun game. I'm ready for it to happen. I'm ready for this year whenever Ole Miss goes up to, what do they call it? The Palace on the Plains, go up there.
Yeah, the Palace on the Prairie. The Palace on the Prairie.
Palace on the Prairie. It should be exciting. And Ole Miss has LSU this weekend. And if Ole Miss wins that game, they're going to be thinking playoff whenever they come up to Norman. So it should be pretty exciting.
Yeah, I mean, with the way that things have kind of transpired through the first 4 weeks of the season, there's a pretty good shot that both teams are undefeated. Now, Oklahoma would have to get through Texas and South Carolina for that to be the case. But, I mean, Texas has not looked like a world beater this year, and South Carolina has had their struggles as well. So, I mean, there's a pretty solid chance this could be a top 10 matchup when Ole Miss comes up to Norman. And, I mean, Trinidad, my goodness, dude, Trinidad Chambliss has just looked like an otherworldly being with the way that he's throwing the football right now for the Rebels. And so this is a chance to build into a great matchup this week or this season. And then for the next 4 years beyond, going back and forth, I expect both programs to be pretty good. And it's going to have playoff implications every time that they step on the field.
Yeah, it should be a lot of fun. Now, granted, Oklahoma fans are probably upset that they're not getting the Ole Miss version from 2017. That's the version of Ole Miss that they wanted. But as it sits right now, it does have a chance to be a good game. I'm curious where they're going to put it on the schedule, though. That is my point, because Mississippi State's always at the end for Ole Miss. I hope that the SEC has the good sense to move the LSU game back to Halloween weekend like it's rightly supposed to be. But Oklahoma, I could see that being an end of September type rivalry game.
Yep.
I think that is the location.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense because Oklahoma will have Texas on the second weekend of October. And then Jay and I were talking about it, that my co-host at Locked On Sooners, that Missouri should probably be that Thanksgiving weekend game, the final regular season game of the year between Oklahoma and Missouri, just because it makes sense. They've played 97 times dating back to 1902, and every year from like 1910 to 1995, they played every single time except for in 1918 when World War I was going on. So that makes sense. So yeah, early September or end of September, or I mean, the SEC kind of got weird with their scheduling this year, and they had some week 2, week 3 conference games. So, I mean, we could have been talking OU Ole Miss after this past weekend or whatnot, but that makes a lot of sense. Now get down into Mississippi in September. That doesn't sound incredibly enticing with the humidity and what it's going to be, but also it gets pretty hot up in Oklahoma as well. So either way, it's going to be hot. So make sure you got your cool beverages on tap down at the Grove.
I watched a little bit of the Auburn and Oklahoma game this past weekend. I couldn't watch the whole thing because Ole Miss was playing at the exact same time. It just happened to work out that way. Everybody is going to talk about what happened in the decision. The more impressive thing to me in that ball game was the 2 plays by John Mateer in that winning drive. The pass down the field, just a perfect strike, and then the run for the go-ahead touchdown. John Mateer has the potential to have a transcendent type season. He can start having Heisman moments, potentially in my mind, against Texas. What do you think?
Yeah, that final drive was huge for him and for the Sooners, obviously, but you look at his first half stats, he was 8 of 16. He was not efficient. He was a little bit inaccurate, not quite settled, just didn't look quite comfortable with what Auburn was trying to do. They were playing a lot of coverage, trying to just rush 4 and then spy him. But then second half, in the third quarter, he was 12 of 16. In the fourth quarter, he was 4 of 4 and had the big 31-yard completion to Isaiah Satania, and then the 9-yard touchdown run, which happened to be Oklahoma's longest run of the day, against which is a really good Auburn defensive front. Yeah, man, that Texas game every single year, it's the standout. How you perform in that one a lot of times is going to tell the story of if you're going to go on and have a Heisman campaign, if you're going to have an All-American season, if you're going to be remembered in Oklahoma lore. You look back to 2023 with Dylan Gabriel. He's not going to go down as one of Oklahoma's most beloved quarterbacks of all time, but he's going to be up near the top of the list because he was able to orchestrate a 2-minute drill in the final couple minutes to give Oklahoma a lead and go win a Red River Showdown that I think everybody in Oklahoma felt like that was a must win after what happened in 2022 when they just got the brakes beat off of them in Brent Venables' first season. So if he goes and he has a big performance against what many consider a great Texas defense, then he'll certainly put himself in the conversation. But I mean, you got a guy down there in Oxford and Trinidad that wasn't the starter to begin the season, but came in for Austin Simmons and kind of stole the show over the last couple of weeks in SEC play and in non-conference play. And he's looked fantastic. He could be a dark horse contender right now as well.
Yeah, this is one of those games. If he has another game like he's had the last 2, he's definitely going to enter the conversation. He's a little bit slight of build. He kind of reminds me a little bit, especially of him running, of Kyler Murray.
Okay.
He has a little bit of that dead leg going around the corner that you would see from time to time. If he is effective against LSU, he's not going to see a better defense over the course of the season than LSU. So that gives you confidence going to Athens. That gives you confidence going to Norman. They're both very good defenses. I'm not saying they're bad. I'm just saying LSU is really good. If that happens, that lets you know it's like, hey, maybe we'll be all right with Trinidad if he's the starting quarterback. But if not, if he struggles against LSU, I think you can see Austin Simmons kind of coming back around and the offense changing as well. We'll see.
Yeah, I mean, Arkansas, they don't have a defense necessarily to write home about, but Tulane is a well-coached team with John Summerall. I mean, that is a really tough team to play against because they're going to be schemed up really, really well. But Trinidad is putting up like video game numbers the last 2 weeks. 660 passing yards and 3 touchdowns over the last 2 weeks, 174 rushing yards and 2 touchdowns over the last couple weeks. Dude, that's crazy. That is crazy. Those are Heisman numbers right there.
Yeah, John Summerall actually said after the game that he's an annoying player to play against. And he doesn't mean that as a bad thing, but you could have him absolutely schemed up and exactly what you want to happen, and he could still get a first down. He could still break a 40-yard run. And that's crazy to think about, that he was a backup quarterback 3 weeks ago and nobody really knew anything about him. Now it's like, ooh, what is Trinidad going to do next? And he also has just a great first name.
Yeah. I mean, he's Trinidad. Like, I don't care what his last name is anymore. He's just Trinidad. He's earned the one name moniker so far through his first couple of starts.
All right, John, thank you so much for coming on and talking about the annual opponents, Ole Miss and Oklahoma, for the next 4 years. Yeah, I can't wait.
We didn't talk like Lane Kiffin versus Brent Venables, like the offensive defensive matchup.
We got 3
so much
weeks
fun,
to
man.
go for that. Yeah, we got 3 weeks to go for that. So yeah, we're going to cover that. But man, you have a good time. Tell Jay I said hey.
Yep.
And I'll see you on the squad shows, man.
Yeah, y'all have a great one.
Thank you for making Locked On Ole Miss your go-to source for Ole Miss sports. We pride ourselves on offering the most comprehensive perspectives, which is why we're the front door of Ole Miss. Don't forget to subscribe, like, or comment. It helps the show and it's absolutely free. Your support means the world to us. In another big moment for Locked On, college football fans, Locked On and Fire TV are presenting College Football Kickoff, your ultimate weekly preview. Drake Toll of Locked On Big 12 leads the conversation alongside two-time AP Coach of the Year, Gary Patterson, and former college star Jesse Holley, as well as Locked On's local experts. I'll be on the show this week, by the way. A college football preview only Locked On can do. Catch College Football Kickoff every Thursday throughout the season, only on Fire TV. Hotty toddy, everybody. And remember, analytics is just the old English word meaning bad football. We'll see you tomorrow.